Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, my name is Angel and today we're doing some more Summer-Ween Halloween DIYs. Last year I did this little thrift store ghost painting, and this year I actually found a painting with a similar frame, and this time it had a little cottage in it. So I thought I could turn this one into a witch's cottage. So to do this, I'm just going to be using some acrylic paints in some autumn colors and then some small paint brushes. When doing these thrift store paintings and changing them up, you always want to start with things that are in the background. So for this one, I am going to start with the house. I'm going to turn this into a witch's cottage, and I am doing the roof of this by mixing a little bit of black and white and doing a really dark gray. You'll notice there are some trees in the background, but I'm not going to worry about those just yet because once I start doing those, then I can cover the roof a little bit with the leaves. Now, as for the house itself, I'm kind of going with a Salem vibe, and I just mixed a little more white into that black paint to do a lighter but still dark gray. And you will notice there are flowers coming up onto the house, so I'm kind of just painting around those, and I am painting over some of them, but I'm leaving some so that I know where to come back and put those autumn colors. As for the door arches and windows, I am going to go in with a dark brown color and just use a little liner brush to go over the window frames and that arch and the porch. I used the same brown color on the chimneys for now. Then it was time to move on to all the foliage, and I am basically just taking a kind of burnt orange color and mixing it with a little bit of black, a little bit of gray here and there, or just using the burnt orange color by itself and making lots of highlights and shadows in these trees and bushes. And I'm just using a fluffy round brush and just dabbing this paint all over the picture. And I'm going to keep going with those colors, the burnt orange, the gray mixed in a little bit, and the black mixed in here and there. And I'm going to go over all of the flowers and everything, even up the house. And by now the house is completely dry, so I can go back in and do a few details. One thing, I wanted this to look like the house in Salem, which has the shaker style wood on it. So I am just taking a liner brush and some black paint and very lightly making some lines across there. And then I did the same thing with the roof. Then going back to the chimneys, I used some dark red paint and that liner brush again with the black paint to make that look like bricks. Then I'm going to do the walkway by mixing a little bit of gray paint, some tan paint, some brown paint, and just make those look like dark stone. And once they were dry, I mixed up a lighter tan color and just went over all of those. And since this is acrylic paint, you could kind of see the darker ones under there. And I used my liner brush with some brown paint and really defined all those stones. Then it was time to add a witch and a little black cat, so I'm just using my pencil and sketching those out. Then I'm going to use my little liner brush again and trace around all of my pencil marks and then fill those in with some black paint. I'm going to have the cat and the witch facing the cottage just to make it easier for myself. I don't have to draw faces or anything, so I just had to draw the back of her head and the backside of her dress. I added some bats in the sky and a couple spider webs on the house, and also to finish it off, I just did some more foliage around the bottom of her dress. And of course, the final things I had to add was a jack-o'-lantern on the porch and then adding some smoke to the chimney. For this project, I found this little broken lamp lantern thing at the thrift store. It did have a little piece that goes up into the top of it for a light bulb, I believe. But anyway, we are going to turn this into a little bat candle holder. So the first thing I did with this was take it outside and spray paint it with some of my black Rust-Oleum spray paint. Then I really wanted this to kind of look like an old creepy tree. So I'm going to take some Mod Podge and some tissue paper, and I'm going to start ripping this tissue paper into some smaller pieces and kind of put Mod Podge all over this. And then I'm going to work my way upward with the tissue paper, kind of wrapping it around and tearing off certain pieces if I needed to. Then I will go back in and do a layer of Mod Podge over top of this. The more wrinkles, the better. It's going to look even more creepy and spooky. So I'm going to continue working my way upward until I get to that little ball at the top. Then I wanted to make a few creepy, spooky branches for this. So I'm just twisting up some tissue paper and putting Mod Podge all over it, and then Mod Podging that to the lamp as well. And I didn't go too crazy with these branches. I just made a few and attached them to the spooky tree. Once everything was completely dry, then I'm going to take some black paint and some brown paint, and I'm just going to kind of randomly mix this. I'm not mixing it really well. I'm just letting it mix as I am painting over this entire thing. While that's drying, I'm going to start working on the bats that I want to hang from here. So I'm using some air dry clay, rolling that out, and then using this little bat cookie cutter that I got last year. And I'm going to end up making 3 of these clay bats. To add a little bit of detail to these bats, I'm using this clay tool that I actually got from Dollar Tree, and I'm just pushing it down into the wings on the bats to give those a little more definition, and then also using it to kind of line out where their body is. And before I set these aside to dry, I am going to poke little holes in the very top of these, and then I'm going to lay them on my rolling pin to dry so that their wings dry forward. I let them dry overnight, and then I'm going to go in with a couple coats of my black chalk paint and paint these bats, and then once they're dry, I did go over them with a little bit of Mod Podge. Now, as you can see on this lamp, there is a little hole right there. It's kind of like a screw hole where I'm assuming the light went in this, but I needed a way to hang these bats from here, so I am using a little bead that will fit perfectly up in that hole, and I'm gonna use some necklace chain to hang these bats. So I put it up through the bead, and then I put a big jump hoop on the top of it just so that this won't come back out of the bead. Then I'm just gonna use some gel super glue in that hole and stick this bead right down in there. I added some larger jump hoops in the top of the bats where I made the holes before. Then I just used those jump hoops to attach them down the necklace chain. And once I attached the last one, then I just used some pliers to remove the excess chain. For this project, I'm going to be using these silicone molds of ghosts that I got from Amazon. These are originally for candles, but I'm going to be using some plaster of Paris in these. I ended up making 5 of these, so it took about 5 cups of the plaster of Paris to do all of them. And as I've said in a previous video, I do buy my plaster of Paris in a huge tub from Amazon for around $9. And for this project, I just mixed it as it says on the tub, and then I poured it into these molds. Now, one thing I want to mention is before I pour the plaster into any molds, I do wet them with cold water, and this is going to help you be able to remove it a lot easier. Now, each of these takes about 24 hours to completely cure and dry. So once I've filled them up, I do give them a little shake and a little bounce to get any any air bubbles out, and then I will just set these aside and let them dry. And here they are the next day, all dry. All I had to do was kind of flip that mold inside out to get these little ghosts out of there. Now these molds do come with two different kinds of ghosts. So this one right here with the little arms was just a little more difficult to get out, but that's just because I had to get the mold over his arm first and then pull it over his head. Now I gave all 5 of my little ghosts a light sanding just to get off any of the little pieces at the bottom of them, and then I'm going to go over them with 2 coats of my white chalk paint. Then to finish these off, I decided to paint them with some black paint and my little liner brush and just do some botanicals on these ghosts. If you wanted to, you could absolutely use some rub-on transfers or even some stamps just to make these ghosts a little bit different. Once I finished hand painting them, then I sealed all of them with 1 coat of Mod Podge. For this project, I'm using a brick that I just had laying around, and I printed off this ghost photo from my Etsy shop onto a piece of rice paper. I did spray this with a sealer, but you'll see in just a little bit it still bleeds kind of. So I am going to do the iron on Mod Podge with this. The first thing I'm going to do is use my watercolor pen here with just some water in it, and I'm going to go around this photo, making this just a little smaller than the brick, and I'm just going to tear the edges off of here. Then I'm going to layer on a thick coat of Mod Podge, and I'm going to make sure I get all those edges and everywhere. Then I'll let this sit and dry completely. Once the brick is dry, then I'm going to lay my image over top of the brick and place a piece of parchment paper on top of there. Then I'm just going to use my mini iron and go over this for a few minutes. I'm working my way around the image pretty slowly, making sure that I get all of those edges. Then I wanted to add some texture to this, so I am making my own texture paste because I ran out of spackling, just using some acrylic paint, some white school glue, and a little bit of baking soda. Then I'm mixing this into a paste consistency. I'm going to be using this Tim Holtz brick stencil that I got from Amazon and a little spatula, and then just randomly putting some of these bricks with that texture paste all over this brick. I even went around the sides of this and did some of the brick stencil as well. Once it was dry, I'm going to go over this entire brick with the color Warm Buff in some acrylic paint and just kind of dabbing this color all over the brick and where I did the stenciling. Then I'm going to take a darker brown color and randomly paint some of those bricks. Then on some of the other ones, I am going to use the color Plaster in some Waverly chalk paint, and again, just randomly painting some of those bricks. In between all of the bricks, I'm using my liner brush and going in with a really dark brown color. Then to finish this off, I am taking some antiquing wax and barely dabbing some on my brush and going over this entire brick to age it up. I'm actually going to use this as a door stopper, but it would also make a really cute bookend. And that's going to be it for today's video. I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.